Eddie Chavez, Ruben Nava, and Jesse Romero. Jesus 911.
Jesus 911 on Virgin Most Powerful Radio. We are live. Two-man car. Our call signs are John 3:16. We're here to give you some Catholic briefing. So pull up a chair, grab your cup, and let's listen attentively. And we've got a good show today, Jess. Good morning.
Reporting for duty, sir.
All right.
Ruben, I love it that as Catholics, obviously the author and finisher of our faith is the Lord Jesus Christ, but we have a family that oftentimes non-Catholics forget about, and those are called the saints. They're not dead. Their bodies may be buried somewhere, but they're alive. They're more alive than we are in heaven right now.
That's right.
And one of the great saints of that we need to continue to venerate and remember more and more, especially in this crisis of homosexual and lavender mafia clergy, is a saint by the name of St. John Vianney, patron saint of parish priest, one of the holiest priests that ever walked the face of this earth. In fact, Ruben, I've even read that it was known people would actually see him oftentimes levitate during the consecration at Holy Mass.
Yep, that's true. He just, he said something to his sister. By the way, I went to venerate his incorruptible heart yesterday at the parish in Hacienda Heights, California, named it after him, St. John Vianney's parish. Saw Terry and his wife there, and it was very moving to be in the company of, God's given us this miracle of St. John Vianney's heart, but his heart was so united to Jesus. Jesus was in him. He was working miracles through him, and this just a testament to God's greatness is that he raises up these great saints to raise our faith up. And St. John told us, St. John Vianney, the curé of ours, he once told his sister he can at all times work miracles, and he would work them now as in the days of old, were it not for that faith is wanting. He said God is always almighty, but because our faith is wanting, he's not working so many miracles as he was. And he there was so many miracles attributed to him. I was pulling up an article and looking at some of the things that he had done, and they're just fascinating. And we as Catholics, we sometimes miss this just because we're sitting on Fort Knox. We have this great wealth of faith and heroes beneath us and above us and around us. We don't tap into it. We're like beggars out there on the street with nothing in our pockets. But if we only realized what we had, if we only asked our Lord, Lord, please show me, open my heart. And so that to be able to be there in the company of St. John Vianney's heart, because we don't pray to dead people, Jess. We're praying to the saints. We're praying to live people. Like you said, they're more alive than us because they're not encumbered with sin. One of the greatest.
Just jump in. One thing kind of interesting here. Can you imagine if the Muslim religion, or even the Jewish religion, or the Protestants, if they had one of their preachers, pastors, theologians that had an incorrupt heart, verifiably incorrupt, being able to be scientifically proven, they would be shouting this from the rooftops. It would be on CNN, MSNBC. It would be on PBS. It would be nonstop billboards on freeways. We have in the Catholic Church verifiably what no other religion has, Ruben.
Yeah, that's true. And that heart has been out taken from his breast. It's been taken out over 140 years ago, and it's still intact. So amazing, huh? And it was taken. I think it was taken out of him like 30 or 40 years after he died. But he used to say the greatest miracles of all that occurred in ours, he insisted, were the miracles of conversion. The conversion of someone from a state of mortal sin to grace. He said It is a greater miracle that what the Lord did to raise Lazarus. The body is so very little in comparison, he said, to the sacrament that heals the wounds of our soul. So very true. These were the types of miracles for which the patron saint of priests implored God the most. And having witnessed, and so many of them as a confessor, it's, he healed people in the confessional, people that would come to him and couldn't speak, and thus they couldn't give confession. He would heal them. A priest friend of mine would say the same thing about this. Lazarus, he was raised from the dead, but he died again. A lot of us are asking for healing of the body, but we need to really ask for the healing of the souls. And, he did say some miracles require faith and morals flow from faith. And Father Vianney, he demanded this living faith from those who came with such requests. To a young epileptic from Marseille who was not living chastely, he said, that is not the way to behave for someone who desires to be cured.
Wow.
To a young girl with a paralyzed shortened leg, he told her that her leg would be cured to the extent that she became truly respectful of her mother. Over the course of the next 3 months, she worked on it, and her leg inexplicably began to grow and acquire complete neuromuscular control. And often the saint tried to help people to see that a physical cure might not be spiritually good for them, as we've discussed, as we may have discussed in previous talks. St. John Vianney viewed the cross as a caress, not a curse.
As a caress?
As a caress, like Jesus is caressing him, not a curse. And he believed that the greatest cross is to have no cross. The greatest cross is to have no cross. He therefore said to a sick man, "Oh, my friend, I do not know whether to pray for your cure or not. One should not take the cross from shoulders that are so well able to bear it." These are words that we should ponder. And, as I mentioned on our last show, he was a great devotee to St. Philomena. And just to tell you a little about that, St. Philomena, it was in France that she was brought to France. And listen to this. Normally, St. John Vianney tried to deflect the agency of the miracles the Lord worked for him. His greatest thaumaturgical co-conspirator was St. Philomena. When St. John Vianney was just 16, the grave of this young female martyr was discovered in the catacombs of St. Philomena in Rome, and her remains brought to Mugano, a suburb of Naples. So it was in Italy. Since she had died for the faith about the age of anywhere from 13 to 15, the pious future priest developed a natural devotion to this heroic young contemporary about whom little was known beyond her name. When Father Vianney received a relic of hers after his ordination, he resolved to spread devotion to her. And during the renovation of the Church of Ars, he built an altar to her and installed her relics within. It was from that altar that her fame grew by leaps and bounds. To those who came to the Curé of Ars asking for cures, he replied, "I do not work miracles. I am but a poor, ignorant man who once upon a time tended sheep." That's humility there. Address yourselves to St. Philomena. I have never asked anything through her without being answered. He affectionately called her his dear little saint, consul, representative, intermediary, and agent with God. It was clear that they had a very deep personal supernatural friendship. And he sent a young girl to her, hadn't been able to speak in 2 years, to go pray to St. Philomena altar with these words: "Tell her that if she's not willing to restore your voice to you, she should give you her own."
Wow.
She was cured at the end of the prayer. And to a woman paralyzed on the left side, he instructed, "Go talk about this to St. Philomena and tell her to restore my arm to me. Restore my arm to me, or give me your own." She was healed instantly.
Ruben, one of the things about St. John Vianney, I've read also that he used to sleep very frequently under the high altar. I mean, it was the Latin Mass back then.
Yes.
So he wouldn't even go to the rectory to sleep. He wanted to be so close to Jesus that he would just sleep inside the church, underneath the tabernacle, underneath the altar. That was very common for him. Another thing we know about him is that, he was visited by the devil, and he didn't pay him any attention. He would just say, "Oh, it's you again. Okay, I'm going back to bed." This is how common the attacks were, and he just knew. He didn't have fear. He just dismissed him like, "Dude, you're irrelevant. You're making noise here in the kitchen. I'm going back to bed." Another thing we know about St. John Vianney, he would immediately reach the highest point of prayer, which is called contemplative prayer. He would just go and sit or kneel before Jesus in the Blessed Sacrament, and he would just be, it's called contemplative prayer, or we could call it sacred silence, what King David says, be still and know that God is. He would just stay there and contemplate about God, his goodness, his beauty, his truth, about eternal life, about the afterlife, about God's glory and majesty and greatness. That's called contemplative prayer. That's a sacred silence. And not oftentimes, unfortunately, that's the opposite of what we see when you go to Mass at the average parish. Everybody's, fist pumping and patting each other in the back and talking about the barbecue. When before Holy Mass, you should be preparing yourself in sacred silence, like St. John Vianney, because something miraculous is about to happen. The second person of the Trinity is going to come down to the altar and feed our soul.
Amen. Amen, Jess. One kind of a very cool story that I'll just mention is that once when those at the orphanage and the school, they told him in desperation that there was no longer any food at all to eat, he bowed his head and prayed and sent one of the staffers up to the previously empty attic with a cup to bring down some corn. The confused young woman looked at him in obedience, and she went up there only to return seconds later saying she couldn't open the door. When others went to help her, they discovered that the reason that they couldn't open the door was that the entire attic was filled with corn to the very roof. Multiplication, Jesus did say that we're going to do greater miracles than these. Amen. We'll be right back.
This is Terry Barber inviting you, all the men, to a men's conference June 15th at the Sacred Heart Chapel. This is going to be a day where we're going to talk about true masculinity. There's a problem in the Catholic Church today. We have very few men who love the Catholic faith. And I know a lot of the wives that I'm listening to right now saying, I want my husband to be on fire for the faith. Send him to the men's conference. Your son, send him to the men's conference by going to virginmostpowerfulradio.org or call 877-526-2151. That's June 15th. When your husband comes back from this conference, or your son, they're going to have a different view about their Catholic faith, because they're going to meet three men who love Jesus and his bride, the church, and are going to instill in them a love for Christ and his church, the Eucharist, Our Lady. Bring them to virginmostpowerfulradio.org. Sign up there or call 877-526-2151. Full sheen ahead.
It is only because of your continued prayers and generous donations that Virgin Most Powerful Radio can broadcast live each weekday. We count on your spiritual and financial support because you understand the urgent need for Catholic programming that shares the gospel with clarity and charity, but without compromise. Please prayerfully consider becoming a monthly donor. You can set it up with the touch of a button on our website, catholicrc.org.
Buying or selling your home or your business property? This is Terry Barber. Real Estate for Life underwrites the Terry and Jesse Show. And they can connect you to one of 900 pro-life real estate agents around the world. And when they receive their referral fee, they will give 80% of it to a pro-life organization. Wow! That's 80%! realestateforlife.org, 877-LIFE-US1.
Now, back to Jesus 911. If this call is not an emergency, dial 888-526-2151.
We are back, Jesus 911, on Virgin Most Powerful Radio, where iron sharpens iron and one man sharpens another. We are a two-man car. Jesse and I are partnered up.
Patrol. Absolutely. Hey, Ruben, you know what? Coming from a law enforcement and a Christian point of view, I am very I am very put off and very it doesn't surprise me. What actor Jesse Smollett? He's an actor of a series called Empire. I've never watched it.
Never watched it.
And I don't plan on watching it any longer if I ever was planning on watching it. But he's the one who claimed to be attacked. He's the one that reported this possible hate crime. And now we've discovered that he filed a false police report, which, by the way, is a felony in Chicago. And Jesse Smollett is now officially classified as a suspect in a criminal investigation by the Chicago police for filing a false police report. And the detectives from Chicago said, quote, "We're currently presenting evidence before a Cook County grand jury." So what happened?
No, he's already been indicted now.
Oh, he's been indicted?
Yeah, they indicted.
Okay. He hired two Nigerian brothers, two guys that look like Ruben, and they
like Fred.
went out and supposedly they faked an attack and beat him up. And he did this because, again, he wanted to kind of smear President Trump, saying that, that this was something that was motivated by white supremacists. He's already got a history of lying to the police. He was arrested back in 2007 for DUI, and he gave the name of his brother to the police back then. So he's already shown himself to be a very classy individual, when it comes to dealing with law enforcement.
He's an activist, Jeff.
Yeah, and the fact is, this is not the first time. I mean, there's a pattern of this, especially since President Trump has become president, of you have fake, racial attacks or, these hoaxes, these hate hoaxes that continue to be perpetrated. He's just one of many. But I'll tell you why this upsets me is because I can imagine how understaffed Chicago police is.
Oh, my God.
With all the crime that's going on over there. And this guy would tie up, I don't know how many detectives for how many days
20
to
20
investigate
detectives.
something absolutely made up out of whole cloth just because of his hatred for Donald Trump. I'm telling you, Ruben, this is horrible what he did.
Yeah, it is, Jess. To think Chicago has one of the highest murder rates in the country, and because this is what we would call a special, involving a celebrity. It kind of demands a little more attention because the department doesn't want to look bad. That they turned over every rock, and that's unfortunately. And then they said we would investigate other hate crimes with the same intensity. I don't think so. It's just because they got to get it right. It's all in every front page of every newspaper. So they put I think I read like 20 guys on the case. They involved the FBI because he first sent a letter to himself with some white substance at the studios because he wanted to. Apparently, they found out that he was unhappy with his pay, and so when he
makes $1 million
he says,
a year,
"Look how important I am. They're coming after me." There are a lot of pictures with him and the Obamas, by the way. So, he has a little bit of activism in him. Yeah. So.
Yeah, he's an activist, like you said.
When the letter didn't work, then he just devised this whole plan to get beat up and these guys in the MAGA hats, make America great again. It just how despicable, and that it's going to take away from the credibility of real victims of hate crimes.
That's the point.
What a shame. And I was really glad to see that the chief was African American because they couldn't say, "Oh,
he laid him out."
Yeah, he laid him out. It was a great talk, and
it's on YouTube. It's worth watching.
It is. It really is. And so by lying, just like you said, it's they call it a fourth class felony in Chicago, but. So it's looking at 1 to 3 years on that case, but he could also face charges for that threatening letter, using the Postal Service as a federal crime. He could be looking at 5 years in federal prison. So, and if it had been a conservative, Jeff, that guy would have been off the show in a heartbeat.
It would have been Mel Gibson doing that. Can you?
Oh my goodness, he's. They give him like time off. They're going to let to see how it plays out, but. So he's not going to be on the last two episodes, but every politician, Democratic politician, jumped on the bandwagon. Cory Booker and
Kamala Harris,
Kamala.
Bernie Sanders.
Oh yeah, and
Ocasio.
they're speechless
Cortez.
now.
Ruben,
Unbelievable.
can you imagine? Imagine if Jim Caviezel or Kevin James or Mel Gibson would have faked an attack of, I don't know, white liberals or, Hispanic liberals, socialist, progressive nut jobs. If they would have faked an attack to try to smear, just for example, Occupy Wall Street, Black Lives Matters, Mecha, Viva la Raza or something. Can you imagine what would have happened to Catholic actors that have a kind of a conservative worldview if they would have pulled the same shenanigans as this guy? Even when I heard his story, I said, "Wait a minute, let me take a deep breath. This is how can something like this happen in 2019?" Because he alleged that two guys with MAGA wearing hats in sub-zero Chicago morning weather carried a rope, beat him up, and they wanted to lynch him. I'm saying, and he's a homosexual black actor. I'm like, I don't know, Ruben. This sounds like kind of a stretch. But all the liberals, they jumped on board. Kamala Harris, Bernie Sanders, they all believed him. All the alphabet networks. Until the truth came out shortly thereafter, and now everybody all of a sudden is invoking silence.
The first clue would have been, what Subway is open at 2 a.m? Because he went and got a sandwich. He's walking in the streets by himself, and then he's not a true crook because he used his phone to call them before and after. He paid them the $3,500 with a check. Who does that? That's not bright. No, he deserves to go to prison just for that.
Something like that.
Yeah, you can't make it up.
Oh God.
So amazing.
You know what? This is going to the spiritual aspect. What did he do that's wrong? I'll tell you what he did. Okay, he lied, which is a violation of the 8th commandment: "Thou shalt not lie." And who's the liar in chief? Satan. John chapter 8, verse 44, the devil's a liar. And also, what else do we know about the devil? He's a deceiver. Revelation chapter 12, I forget what verse it is. He's a deceiver. So the devil is the father of lies and the father of deception. This, second-rate actor, Jesse Smollett, this is precisely what he did. In a time right now where there is racial tension in the country, he did nothing to try to bring healing. What he did, he lied and he deceived. This is exactly what the devil does, without a doubt. This guy, these plans were concocted in his mind, in league with the diabolical, because what he did is so systemically dark and evil. It would only have to be, concocted in the mind of hell for him to do something like this.
They have so much hatred towards this president, this administration, and everything that we're trying to, the conservatives are trying to restore values, Catholic to Christian values, and Judeo-Christian values that this country was founded on, and they think that we're all racist and xenophobes and homophobes, and all they classify us with every name in the book. And all we're trying to do is maintain what we've had in the past. They don't see that they're the ones who have changed this country, and we just don't want to go in that direction.
Ruben, can you imagine how many detectives and officers were in need this past couple of days for all the other crime that's been happening in Chicago? I'm reading here that over the weekend there was a young black baby that was shot. The child's name Dejon Irving, and the child's on life support.
Wow.
Now, this happened as all these detectives, almost 20 detectives, are pulled over to investigate Jesse Smollett's case. But what about this little boy from Chicago who's been shot? All kinds of police resources and other people have been pulled away from the average Chicago citizen because you have a narcissist here who has a diabolical plan, which is lying and deception, trying to hoax this racial, a racial hate crime, and he's only trying to do it basically to make Donald Trump look bad because, again, he was trying to allege that these attackers were, wearing these MAGA hats and making these MAGA statements. This was specifically to try to destroy the character of President Trump. This is so evil, I can't even put my finger on it.
Yeah, bearing false witness. So we'll see what he's still denying it now. He's going to have his day in court, but I seriously doubt that it'll go that far because they've got so much dirt on him. They've got so much evidence that he'd be silly to not take a deal. And he's the guy. One of the guys was a part-time actor in the series, the brother, and the other one was his personal trainer. And so he's calling them out as liars, but they just have to follow the evidence. They got a check from him with his name on it. So,
Ruben, and I'll tell you one thing. There's no way. I don't think anybody would be that dark on the right to fake some type of a racial hate crime under, let's say, when President Obama was president for 8 years.
Yeah. And to use a noose, Jess, he said that they brought a noose out and, he started crying. But that image, just like the chief said, to use that what that noose signifies in back in the day during, slavery and during
the democratic slavery and democratic Jim Crow laws.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. You had to get that in there, huh?
Had to get that in there.
Yeah. Well, what it represents, it's a dark time in our country's history, and for him to use that, it's shameful. Gosh, I don't know what to say about this guy.
Well, I'll tell you what the solution is. The Catholic Church, when it's practiced and fully lived out, that's the solution to racism. Because in the Catholic faith, we're in 198 countries. Holy Mass is being celebrated in every single language. And guess what? The Catholic faith reflects heaven. Heaven, the Bible says in heaven, there are people from every tribe, tongue, and nation. Guess what? That's what Catholicism is all about. Everybody from one tribe, different tribes, tongues, and nations worshiping Jesus and receiving him in the Holy Eucharist. That's the answer to racism.
Amen. We'll be right back.
This is Terry Barber inviting you, all the men, to a men's conference June 15th at the Sacred Heart Chapel. This is going to be a day where we're going to talk about true masculinity. There's a problem in the Catholic Church today. We have very few men who love the Catholic faith. And I know a lot of the wives that I'm listening to right now saying, I want my husband to be on fire for the faith. Send him to the men's conference. Your son, send him to the men's conference by going to virginmostpowerfulradio.org or call 877-526-2151. That's June 15th. When your husband comes back from this conference or your son, they're going to have a different view about their Catholic faith because they're going to meet 3 men who love Jesus and his bride, the church, and are going to instill in them a love for Christ and his church, the Eucharist, Our Lady. Bring them to virginmostpowerfulradio.org. Sign up there or call 877-526-2151. Full sheen ahead.
It is only because of your continued prayers and generous donations that Virgin Most Powerful Radio can broadcast live each weekday. We count on your spiritual and financial support because you understand the urgent need for Catholic programming that shares the gospel with clarity and charity, but without compromise. Please prayerfully consider becoming a monthly donor. You can set it up with the touch of a button on our website, catholicrc.org.
Buying or selling your home or your business property? This is Terry Barber. Real Estate for Life underwrites the Terry and Jesse Show, and they can connect you to one of 900 pro-life real estate agents around the world. And when they receive their referral fee, they will give 80% of it to a pro-life organization. Wow, that's 80%. realestateforlife.org, 877-LIFE-US1.
Now, back to Jesus 911. If this call is not an emergency, dial 888-526-2151.
Jesus 911 on Virgin Most Powerful Radio. We are a two-man car. We are giving you we had been talking about the actor Jesse Smollett and some of the things that he had been doing to land himself in jail. You know, the show, we call it Jesus 911. And, you know, people, over the course of my career, we've always had people call it 911 to ask for police help or, you know, fire. All the calls came through us, the police or fire calls, and we would route them to where they needed to go. But I got a list of a bunch of calls that came up that just are funny, and they're true. I'm just give you one a day just to kind of add some levity to the show.
Let's hear it.
Let's see. Here's the first one. I'll just give you one today. Dispatcher, 911, what's the nature of the emergency? Caller, I'm trying to reach 911, but my phone doesn't have an 11 on it. Dispatcher, this is 911. Caller, I thought you just said it was 911. Dispatcher, yes, ma'am. 911 and 911 are the same thing. Caller, honey, I may be old, but I'm not stupid. All right. You hear all kinds of stuff on those
I can
phones.
imagine. I've never worked the 911 desk, but I can imagine. Hey, we got Daniel from San Bernardino. He wants to weigh in. Daniel, you're on. Go, brother.
Reporting for duty, sir.
Hey,
Thank
Daniel.
Hey, Jesse, Ruben, how are you guys?
How you doing?
I wanted to make a comment on. I was watching a Fox News in YouTube, and they were talking about the Smollett case right now. And they actually play a clip where the View show, where
Joy Behar.
Wolver, Whoopi Wolver say, well, why are we Democrats and liberals taking this to the stream? You know, we should rethink all the things that we're doing, and we want to know why we're doing to these lengths of lying and all of that. And this other lady said, because we want to get Trump out of office.
It was Joy Behar that said that.
Yeah, so I was like, wow, they really want to go. You know, it's just unbelievable. I just
it's on YouTube.
That.
You can watch it. The conversation between Whoopi Goldberg and Joy Behar, and they're saying, you know, wow, we just got caught right now, and why are we going to these extremes about lying? And Joy Behar admitted, it's on national television. She says, because we're so desperate to get Trump out, that's why we're making stuff up. So they've admitted it,
correct.
And this is going to continue. Their hatred of him, it blinds their common sense. It blinds their rational thought. You're right, Daniel. Great point.
Yep.
And you know what it is? If I was a Democrat and I would look at it, would make me think twice that I'm actually at the right party. I'm like, well, I'll probably be like, see you later, like I did years ago. I just, couldn't believe. Yeah.
Smart man, Daniel. Smart man. I'm glad you're listening.
Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you very much, Jesse.
Yep.
Take care, guys.
You got it.
Okay.
It reminds me of what the Baltimore Catechism says. It says, sin darkens the intellect. Sin, and I'll make it simpler, sin makes you stupid. Okay? When you're just when you're just living a life of mortal sin, you got no sanctifying grace in your soul, you don't think rationally. Your thoughts oftentimes are clouded, and your thoughts are always oriented towards evil. Hey, Ruben, I think St. Thomas Aquinas would make a good immigration czar under the Trump administration. I think a lot of people don't know what for St. Thomas Aquinas, I always quote him. Let me tell you who he is. He's the greatest thinker in 2,000 years of Catholicism. He's one of the 36 doctors of the church. There's only 36 PhDs, not PhDs from a liberal university. These are doctors in the eyes of God because they've taken our understanding of God and theology and faith in the interior life to heights unknown before in Catholicism. And Thomas Aquinas is the doctor of all doctors. He's He's known as the angelic doctor. In fact, the first 1,000 years, they say Augustine was the greatest mind of the church. The second 1,000 years of St. Thomas Aquinas. All last 700 years of popes have said that this is the greatest thinker we've ever produced in the church.
That's right.
He was very pro-immigration. Here's some of the things he says about immigration right from the Summa. Now, a lot of us think it's a modern problem. No, St. Thomas was talking about this problem back in the 12th and 13th century. Here's one of the things that he says, quote, man's relations with foreigners are twofold, peaceful and hostile. And in directing both kinds of relation, the law contained suitable precepts. So here's the commentary. Here's what St. Thomas is affirming. He's saying that not all immigrants are equal. He says that every nation has the right to decide which immigrants are beneficial, that is peaceful to the common good, and as a matter of self-defense, the state can reject those criminal elements, traitors and enemies, and others who it deems harmful or hostile to its citizens. Ruben, this is cut and paste right from President Trump's immigration policy.
Yeah.
Cut and paste.
That's St. Thomas speaking. Was that St. Thomas speaking, or was that President Trump speaking?
No, that's his commentary.
Yeah, I know, but it sounds
Summa.
just like what President Trump has been saying. You know, what can those people bring to this country? You know,
that's called a merit-based system, and that's what St. Thomas said. And he's also saying, look, not everybody's peaceful, man. He was living in the time of the Crusades.
Yeah.
So he knew that, you know, the Holy Roman Empire, Catholic Europe, it wasn't a smart thing to be taking in large hordes of people from the Ottoman Empire. He knew that. And that's what he's saying. Hey, there's some people that are not peaceful to us. Don't bring them in. Yeah. But there are some people that are beneficial. They are peaceful. We can bring them in once we screen them. I mean, very just common sense.
Yeah. And the second thing he affirms is that the manner of dealing with immigration is determined by law in the cases of both beneficial and hostile immigration. And so he says the state has the right and the duty to apply its law. And St. Thomas says, for the Jews were offered 3 opportunities of peaceful relations with foreigners. First, when foreigners passed through their land as travelers. Secondly, when they came to dwell in their land as newcomers. And in both these respects, the law made kind provision in its precepts. For it is written, and he quotes Exodus 22:21, thou shalt not molest a stranger. And again in Exodus 22:9, he says, thou shalt not molest a stranger. So in the commentary, St. Thomas acknowledged that the fact that others will want to come to visit or even stay in the land for some time, and such foreigners deserve to be treated with charity, respect, courtesy, which is due to any human being, any human of goodwill. And in these cases, the law can and should protect foreigners from being badly treated or molested. Yeah, none of us is asking for the immigrants to be treated badly. None of us would, when they're put in these detention centers, none of us want to see them to suffer or to have anything go bad or be separated from their children. And we have to accommodate them as best we can until they go through the screening process. But you just can't just have open borders. They can just march in and do whatever they want to do. What's the third point he says, Jess?
Here he says, thirdly, St. Thomas, when any foreigners wish to be admitted entirely to their fellowship and mode of worship, and he's talking about the Jews in context here, the Jews admitting foreigners. He says, with regard to these, a certain order was observed, for they were not at once admitted to citizenship, that is to Israel, just as it was law with some nations that no one was deemed a citizen except after 2 or 3 generations. And he quotes also Aristotle. So notice what St. Thomas is saying here. He's recognizing that there will be those who will want to stay from another country.
Right.
And they'll want to become citizens of the land they visit. However, he sets as the first condition for acceptance a desire to integrate fully into what would be today considered the culture and the life of the nation. And a second condition is that granting of citizenship should not be immediate. It's an integration process which takes time because people need to adapt themselves to the nation that's receiving them. And St. Thomas quotes Aristotle as saying that this process of granting somebody a citizenship can take 2 or 3 generations. And St. Thomas himself does not give a time frame for this integration, but he does admit that it takes a long time. Again, and the third point he talks about, Ruben, is about foreigners meddling with the affairs of a nation. If you want to share that.
Yeah.
This is an important one here.
The common sense of St. Thomas right there. Certainly.
This is what it says. The reason, here's his next one.
Okay, the reason for this is that if foreigners were allowed to meddle with affairs of the nation as soon as they settled down in its midst, many dangers might occur, since the foreigners, not yet having the common good firmly at heart, might attempt something hurtful to the people. And then he says, the common sense of St. Thomas is certainly not politically correct, but it's logical. The theologian notes that this is the commentary on what he's saying, notes that living in a nation is a complex thing. It takes time to know the issues affecting the nation. Those familiar with the long history of their nation are in the best position to make long-term decisions about its future. It's harmful and unjust to put the future of a place in the hands of those recently arrived, who, although through no fault of their own, have little idea of what is happening or has happened in the nation. Such a policy could lead to the destruction of the nation. Jess, and I thought about this. I said, you see this in our former liberal governor, Jerry Brown in California. He wanting to, I said that, California, wanting to do just that by passing AB 60 in October of 2013. It allowed 605,000 illegal immigrants to be issued CDLs, California driver's license, in 2015. And this new law automatically registers people to vote. The governor, knowing full well that all these people will then have the ability to vote illicitly. I might add that, but who's going to be the wiser? If you're going to the DMV and you're renewing or you're getting a license for the first time in California, its system is now set up so that it registers you to vote and puts you on the voting roll call. So I don't know how
Ruben,
many.
I'll tell you how this plays out. I'll tell you, and I know because being a Latino and being in the barrios all my life, I ask the average Catholic Hispanic. I say, "How do you vote?" I might ask this to hundreds of people. They go, "Oh, when I get the ballot, I look at people that have a Hispanic last name and I just vote for them.
God.
If it's a Hispanic last name, I vote for them." See, the Democrats have done this by design because they know if they bring as many people as they can from Central and South America, they don't know the issues of the state, of the country. They look at the last name, Rodriguez, Hernandez, Salazar. They say, "Oh, he's one of us," and they vote for him. This way they continue to prop up and empower those that keep promoting the culture of death without even knowing it, and they're using the Catholic vote. Let's continue on this topic.
Yeah, we'll stay here. You want to hear the rest of this.
This is Terry Barber inviting you, all the men, to a men's conference June 15th at the Sacred Heart Chapel. This is going to be a day where we're going to talk about true masculinity. There's a problem in the Catholic Church today. We have very few men who love the Catholic faith. And I know a lot of the wives that I'm listening to right now saying, "I want my husband to be on fire for the faith." Send him to the men's conference. Your son, send him to the men's conference by going to virginmostpowerfulradio.org or call 877-526-2151. That's June 15th. When your husband comes back from this conference, or your son, they're going to have a different view about their Catholic faith because they're going to meet three men who love Jesus and his bride, the church, and are going to instill in them a love for Christ and his church, the Eucharist, Our Lady. Bring them to virginmostpowerfulradio.org. Sign up there or call 877-526-2151. Full sheen ahead.
It is only because of your continued prayers and generous donations that Virgin Most Powerful Radio can broadcast live each weekday. We count on your spiritual and financial support because you understand the urgent need for Catholic programming that shares the gospel with clarity and charity, but without compromise. Please prayerfully consider becoming a monthly donor. You can set it up with the touch of a button on our website, catholicrc.org.
Buying or selling your home or your business property? This is Terry Barber. Real Estate for Life underwrites the Terry and Jesse Show. And they can connect you to one of 900 pro-life real estate agents around the world. And when they receive their referral fee, they will give 80% of it to a pro-life organization. Wow! That's 80%! realestateforlife.org, 877-LIFE-US1.
Now, back to Jesus 911. If this call is not an emergency, dial 888-526-2151.
Jesus 911 on Virtual Most Powerful Radio. We are talking about what St Thomas Aquinas says about immigration. You know, is this something that is racially motivated? Some of the things that are going on in this country, and what does he say? And we've been going over this article. We were talking about what's going on in California. You know, since that's where I live. Jesse bailed. He bailed on us over here, and he left. You don't have our back over here, Jess. So we were saying that Governor Brown, our last governor, he came up with this AB 60, Assembly Bill 60, and it allows illegal immigrants to get driver's licenses. And their contention is that it would be better that they have licenses when they're driving on the highway than driving without a license. I mean, the rationale is it doesn't make any sense. But he says, what happened was, I don't know how many people were voted illegally because it allows them to be registered to vote when they get a license. So, a 2014 study in the Online Electoral Studies Journal shows that in 2008 and 2010 elections, illegal immigration votes were in fact quite high. And even San Francisco, Jess, they passed a law in San Francisco allowing illegal immigrants to vote on local elections and school board elections, not state and federal. But that's just you give them an inch, they're gonna be trying to take more. You watch. That's
a blueprint for disaster. I'm going to tell you why, Ruben.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of these people that are now voting in California that came here illegally, a lot of them were granted amnesty by Ronald Reagan. Okay, that's a fact. The Reagan amnesty in California granted a lot of illegal immigrants passage into California. And I'll tell you why the Democrats have allowed this, and they have no problem with this, because what's happened is a lot of these post-Reagan amnesty Hispanic immigrants, they continue voting for Democrat politicians who promote abortion and homosexual marriage and all kinds of other perversions. And this is why the Democrats have no problem with illegal immigration, because this continues to feed their voting bloc.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, you know how the Democrats would slam the borders like yesterday? If all these, post-Reagan, amnesty illegal immigrants, if they all voted pro-life, if they voted for pro-family candidates, if they voted against homosexual marriage, against medical marijuana, guess what? Mm-hmm. The Democrats would have put up a wall like yesterday.
Oh, yeah.
But because all these, Reagan granted amnesty illegal immigrants vote for the party of death and for their issues, they just basically live by see no evil, hear no evil, tell no evil.
That's right.
They got no problem with it. Keep them coming, man. This continues and that's why they keep on propping up Latinos all up and down California and the Southwest, because they know that once a Latino comes over here from South America or Mexico and they look at a ballot, they say, oh, you can vote here. It's just a matter of you're illegal. They passed a law, you can vote here. They're going to look at, okay, Erickson or Rodriguez. Okay, I'm voting for Rodriguez. Okay, Barber or Mendoza. I'm voting for Mendoza. They don't know the issues. They don't know the differences between the party platforms. They don't know the culture. They just know that's a Hispanic last name, and he's one of us, and I'm going to vote for him. And this way, the Democrats stay in power. It's a brilliant strategy, Ruben, and it's working.
It is, yeah. And so, just as St. Thomas writes, you don't want to put the future in the hands of those who just recently moved here because they don't know squat. So, let's go on. What else does the article talk about?
Yeah, he talks about another. Here's another good point. He says. St. Thomas later notes that the Jewish people did not treat all nations equally, since those nations closer to them were more quickly integrated into the population than those that were not as close. Some hostile peoples were not to be admitted at all into full fellowship due to their enmity towards Jewish people. So St. Thomas says, nevertheless, it was possible by dispensation for a man to be admitted to citizenship on account of some act of virtue. Thus, it is related in Judith chapter 14, verse 6, that Achior, the captain of the children of Ammon, the Ammonites, was joined to the people of Israel with all the succession of his kindred. So apparently what happened there is the Achior, the captain of the Ammonites, they were enemies of the Jews, but at that point in time, they aligned themselves with the Israelites at war for a common cause. So that was an act of virtue, an act of what you would call solidarity or an act of loyalty towards the Israelites. And so St. Thomas says, if you have foreigners that demonstrate loyalty to the nation, that can be a dispensation to make them citizens. For example, if somebody who's here illegal from some country throws himself in front of the president when somebody tries to shoot him, I would say, give that guy immediate citizenship. If to me, even if an illegal alien goes in and serves in one of the four branches of the service. Yeah. You know what I say? When he comes out, give him immediate citizenship, because they've demonstrated an act of virtue towards that country. Yeah, that's what St. Thomas says, that our rules should not be so rigid. There should be exceptions if we see that some of these foreigners have loyalty to this country. That's what he's saying.
Yeah, I believe our country does do that, Jess. If they serve in the military, then they can get citizenship. And having recently visited Jerusalem in November, I learned that only the Jews are required to serve in the Israeli military. But if a Muslim or a Christian chooses to serve, he's afforded all the federal assistance, like the housing rights that an Israeli soldier is afforded. Because the government helps them with get housing, is what I learned. So there's some of the thoughts on St. Thomas Aquinas on the matter of immigration based on biblical principles. It's clear that immigration must have two things in mind. This is what the author says. The first is the nation's unity, and the second is the common good. Immigration should have as its goal integration, not disintegration or segregation. You don't need people coming with waving the flags of their country. Are they coming to integrate, or are they coming to bring their country, like little Havana or little Saigon or little the immigrant should not only desire to assume the benefits, but the responsibilities of joining into the full fellowship of the nation. By becoming a citizen, a person becomes part of a broad family over the long term, and not a shareholder in a joint stock company seeking only short-term self-interest. And then secondly, he says St. Thomas teaches that immigration must have in mind the common good. It cannot destroy or overwhelm a nation. This explains why so many Americans experience uneasiness caused by massive and disproportional immigration. Such policy artificially introduces a situation that destroys common points of unity and overwhelms the ability of a society to absorb new elements organically into a unified culture. The common good is no longer considered. We saw that happen when people would land in New York, from Europe, and people wanted to be here. They did whatever they could to become a citizen and adopt what this country was all about. Hard work, and good hard work ethic. You just don't see that anymore.
Right.
Yeah. And then it goes on to say, proportional immigration has always been a healthy development in a society since it injects new life and qualities into a social body. But when it loses that proportion and undermines the purpose of the state, it threatens the well-being of the nation. When this happens, the nation should do well to follow the advice of St Thomas Aquinas and biblical principles. The nation must practice justice and charity towards all, including foreigners, but it must above all safeguard the common good and its unity, without which no country can long endure. And just it's been said that it's costing this country some enormous amount of money every year, in the billions. What was it? 3 billion? 30,
I think it's way more than that.
300 billion, huh? 300 billion?
It's in the billions. I know that.
Yeah, to give them Medicare and Medicaid and feed them and put them up and.
Here, I pulled it up. It's 114 billion.
114 billion, and then to house them in prisons. All that takes with the welfare,
education, medical.
Yeah.
All medical, prison, all that. $114 billion a year. By the way, I wrote a book where I have a lot of this stuff. I wrote a long chapter on legal versus illegal immigration from a Hispanic point of view, Latino point of view, Catholic point of view. It's right here. I'm holding it up for you guys watching on social media. It's called Knocked Off the Donkey. Mm-hmm. The meat of the book, I wrote it on illegal immigration and how to think about these issues as a Catholic Christian. And I quote all St. Thomas Aquinas arguments in my book. Ruben, I'll tell you just something else that's just dangerous on a natural level.
Yeah.
Is that, again, you can look at some places in downtown Los Angeles. It's a nightmare.
Oh, it's
gang
horrible.
Violence, homelessness, pollution. It looks like, Ruben, some places look like a third world country. Yeah. San Francisco, you see there, there's poop covered all over the ground, homelessness, people sleeping on the streets. It looks like a third world country in some areas. Importing, in other words, this lack of merit system and importing just anybody from any other country, that's not good for us.
It's not.
Because once again, I don't think we're bringing in the cream of the crop in many instances.
Well, you keep giving people free stuff, and you've got a voter for life. And where's the incentive to go and work and to earn a living if you're going to be everything's going to be handed to you, just like the you go up to Yellowstone National Park, they've got signs everywhere: "Do not feed the bears," because they're not going to. They're going to rely on those handouts. They're going to stop fending for themselves. And the same thing is true. You have to give them the bare necessities, the bare minimum, but encourage them at some point to get back on their feet and get a job.
That's right.
And work. That's what being
let me end here with the words of St. Padre Pio, just to give some words of hope.
Yes.
St. Padre Pio says, "Pray, hope, and don't worry. Worry is useless. God is merciful and will hear your prayer." Catholics, take out your rosaries every day. Lock and load. It's a weapon. It's not a tool.
That's it for the third segment. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being with us, but we'll be back. Don't change that dial. If you have any comments or questions, dial 888-526-2151.
St. Faustina's Prayer for Priests. O my Jesus, I beg thee on behalf of the whole Church, grant it love and the light of thy Spirit, and give power to the words of priests, so that hardened hearts might be brought to repentance and return to thee, O Lord. Lord, give us holy priests. Thou thyself maintain them in holiness. O divine and great High Priest, may the power of thy mercy accompany them everywhere, and protect them from the devil's traps and snares, which are continually being set for the souls of priests. May the power of thy mercy, O Lord, shatter and bring to naught all that might tarnish the sanctity of priests. For thou canst do all things. Amen. Virgin most powerful, pray for us.